Hey, School Bus here. So today let's talk about overclocking in World of Tanks. And does it do anything for you? The first thing you need to talk about is what is the monitor that you're currently using, or maybe what are you thinking about getting? And you really need to match up the hardware inside the box with the monitor that's on the outside. And by that what I mean is you need to make sure that the frame rates you're sending to the monitor is something that the monitor can actually take advantage of. So when looking at monitors, you're going to want to look at the size of it and picking something that has the pixel density that makes sense for the given size of the screen. So size-wise, what I recommend on resolutions is anything below 27 inches, stick to 1080p, you're not really going to gain much, and 27 inches and above, you may entertain 2K or 4K. Something I wish people would have told me is that 4K scales really well to 1080p. You can simply just go in the game and select 1080p, pick up the performance, and it will scale perfectly, so you can have the big desktop, but you don't necessarily need to worry about how to drive it in games. 2K, which is what I'm using, you pretty much just have to stick to running at that the whole time. When also choosing the monitor, you may notice that some of them have what they call FreeSync or G-Sync, and it's AMD uses FreeSync, NVIDIA uses G-Sync, and that's a built-in V-Sync technology that makes sure that the monitor and your video card are syncing at the same rate. And I think that's really important just for overall look of the game, making sure you don't get any tearing. I use the V-Sync built into the game, doing it on the software side. I don't have a monitor with V-Sync or G-Sync. So once you have your syncing figured out, you will then find out what your refresh rate is. Mine's 60 Hertz. There's also 144 Hertz, and it actually kind of goes up from there. I think maybe there are some that are, 180, somewhere in that range. For World of Tanks, 60 frames per second works just fine. You would probably notice improvement over what I'm seeing with 60 Hertz, that the way the names, the icons over tanks, as those move in the game, you would see less blurring of that with 144 Hertz. So once you know whether you're shooting for 60 Hertz or 144 Hertz, then you can begin to think through, okay, what's my target for overclocking? Now, if you don't even achieve anything above, say, 40 frames per second, this is still very relevant to you, because there may be ways for you to get more performance out of your video card and CPU by making some adjustments. So let's now get into talking about, alright, how do we improve the performance? Now the first thing you want to figure out is, are you being limited by your graphics card or by your processor? And the quickest way to find out if you're limited by your graphics card or not is to run some sort of graphics card monitor. I'm using EVGA's Precision OC. There's also MSI Afterburner. You can go out, you can download them, and that'll give you a way to find out what is the GPU percentage that your video card is using. And you can see right now mine is basically just pegged constantly at the top. Note, I do not have V-Sync on right now, just to show you what this looks like. Normally I'd be sitting down in the 50s or 60s during normal gameplay when I'm restricted to 60 frames per second. So now I want to improve my graphics card performance, and along with it I'm going to take a look at what the impact would be of adjusting the CPU as well. So where do we make these changes? And if you aren't familiar with overclocking at all, you might want to go out and do some research. The main thing is you need to find out for your particular hardware, what are its limits? What are people typically able to overclock it to? If you are going to adjust voltages, what range is acceptable with voltage? I'm not going to go into those details in this video. There's too many different variables out there. You'll have to research that yourself. But the CPU, I like doing the edits in CMOS itself, so we'll do that real quick. And then for the video card, I use, as mentioned, Precision OC to make my adjustments. So pulling up CMOS, First thing we need to do is go into the advanced mode, which at least on mine is hitting F7, and then it gives you all these options. Thing we're going to play with the most is the core ratio. And then also I did some testing to see if changing the frequency of the RAM affected things much. Spoilers, it didn't. So if you stop watching right now, don't worry about the memory speed. It's really not going to do much for your gaming performance. I have heard sometimes on AMD processors, particularly some of the new Ryzen chips, they do respond more so to memory. And then we got all these voltages. Just leave all those on auto. Unless you are advanced at this, I would not touch the voltages. So once you've made the adjustments that you're going to make, then you hit F10 and then say OK, and it will apply all the changes. So here's Precision OC, and this is what I use to adjust my video card. And before talking too much more about it, I need to explain that I'm using a 10 series video card from NVIDIA, which has the Pascal chip architecture in it. And one of the things they added with Pascal is this neat little function where it has a power target and a temperature target that it's working from. And so it's constantly evaluating, is it in violation of either one of those targets, and it will adjust the clock speed in accordance with that. So it kind of sits there and constantly keeps overclocking itself on its own. I shouldn't say overclocking, but it's adjusting its clock speed. And so as temperature goes up, it may throttle itself back. That's not thermal throttling per se. Thermal throttling is where it's protecting the chip from damage. And we're not talking about that. We're talking about down at significantly lower temperatures, it'll be adjusting. So with these targets set, and if I set mine at 120, that gives it more headroom. It can play around with that more. I'll go through and start adjusting my clocks on the memory and the CPU. Sorry, the GPU and the memory. And this is a very iterative process. And after several hours of iteration, I came up with that 200 megahertz on the GPU core clock and 450 on the memory was a nice stable spot that was actually a little ways below what I found to be maximum. And this is what I'd call my daily, the best spot to run it where it's not going to damage the processor or any of the internals over the long run. You don't want to run at your absolute highest performance all of the time. It will have a very short life. Now, no matter what you're doing, I recommend going in and adjusting your curve for your fans. Even if you're not overclocking, this can be helpful. So taking a look at my fan curve, you can see I've added quite a few data points. If you're all familiar with the way these look normally, it's pretty chintzy. There might be one or two inflection points. So what I tended to do was sacrifice some noise for some additional cooling. I don't mind hearing the fan a little bit. You can see I put in some weird spots there to try and get it to crash through spots where the fan made a little extra noise during transitions, just weird harmonizations. So play with that. Now let's take a look at what my tweaking in CMOS and on my video card netted me. All right, taking a look at these results. What you're seeing here are tests being done in the Encore test that Wargaming sent out back before World of Tanks 1.0. And then we're also seeing a replay from World of Tanks. It's actually that video of the Lux that you've been seeing in the background. And what this is looking at is what are the average frames per second over that period of time, and then also what was the 1% lowest and 0.1% lowest. Generally the 0.1%, those are kind of flukes in weird transitions, like going between sniper mode and regular view. It's probably less meaningful than the other two statistics. But as you can see, I got plus 12% and 16% respectively between Encore and in-game. Again, I could have pushed this further, but this was where I thought the limits of my hardware to be set on a daily basis. This is where things settled out. Note that it was much more responsive to changes in the GPU, evidenced in the bars from the green one onto the right. The three previous ones had the video card at stock levels. Also note that changing the fan alone, that 90% fan, that's a completely stock setup other than I just went in and put the fan at 90% speed. So it makes a slight difference. Now let's go over and look at the Encore stats. And here you can see, again, the CPU did not have an appreciable impact as we changed it. Because keep in mind, I was adding on the CPU an additional 300 megahertz. Percentage-wise, that would come out to, that was a 6%, almost 7% increase in clock speed. Definitely did not have that much of an impact on the overall performance. And again here, for reference, going to what I consider to be at least maximum for the video card, I could get just above 20,000, but that was pushing it beyond where I'd want to leave it on a daily basis. So in summary, I would say for at least my hardware, World of Tanks responds pretty well to overclocking. Picking up 12 to 16%, that's pretty solid. And your results will vary depending on your hardware setup. Again, it's kind of a prerequisite to get much of an improvement. You need to have an unlocked multiplier. So for Intel chips, you're looking for K designations on your processors. If you don't have the ability to adjust the multiplier, you can go in and simply change the base clock frequency. And I won't go into the details on that. It affects a lot more things. It affects the memory, it affects the graphics card itself, and generally is not going to net you the gains that the multiplier would. But do some research. There may be some things for you to gain there. But just figure out what your needs are, and if you just have a computer that's overall slow, I certainly encourage you to do some adjustments and see if you can squeak just a little bit more performance out of it. And then you might also be in the camp of you've got a great machine, but you just want to get stability of having consistent frame rates and lessen the occurrence of really low frame rates like the 1% and the 0.1% that you saw in the previous charts. So I hope this was helpful, and if you stuck around this long, excellent job. I'm glad you're still here. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please click that like button, and if you enjoy the channel, please subscribe. I think we're up to 40 subscribers. Thank you to all of you who have clicked that subscribe button. You're what motivate me and keep me creating videos. Feel free to leave any comments, and I hope you have a great day. Thanks for watching.